He had never even imagined a future like this before, imagining something like he was going back to school at this age, then shown a powerful attack from the sky that then managed to destroy the building below when it landed. The attack came from a man with a sword in his hand. The man's figure was reflected in the eyes of the monster he was now facing. Seeing the figure of the man who was now getting closer to him, the monster then roared loudly. Not afraid, the man then chopped the monster's body into several parts using his sword. The man's slash was very strong, making parts of the monster's body cut off. After finishing off the monster, the man then looked back. There were several figures who came to him. Seeing that, a smile was then plastered on his face. They were friends of the man's friends. The man also did not expect to be friends with them. At that time, heavy rain hit that soaked a magnificent castle, and in the castle a fire was seen burning throughout the room. There were 4 figures separated by fire into 2 sides. With one side, a man with black hair was seen protecting 2 girls behind him, while the other side was seen a man with a knife in his hand. The black-haired man then asked the man in front of him why he wanted to stop them so much. The man had already said it, they should not advance more than this. He knew the person in front of him was the protagonist of this story, Taylor Clore. But Taylor ignored the man's words, which had an implicit threat in it. He then approached and attacked him while shouting the name of the man, who was Ed Roth Taylor. Ed looked very calm. Even though Taylor's attack was approaching him, he then cast a spell called Ignition, which then gave rise to a smoldering fire that burned around. But Ed's attack was parried by Taylor. Ed then took out a bow and was seen aiming at Taylor, who attacked him. Ed himself is a third-rate villain character in this story. In the original story, he was destined to be a useless nobody who didn't even appear often in the story. However, a third-rate character seems to have their own way. Ed then changed the direction of his aim, and instead of aiming at Taylor, he aimed at one of the 2 girls he was protecting. They were then shocked to see that. Ed then opened fire, which managed to hit the girl, but Ed's own body was successfully stabbed by Taylor using his sword. But instead of feeling pain, he smiled slightly. He didn't need understanding from others. He would not do it in the manner of a protagonist of the story. Taylor was then angry at Ed's smile that seemed to mock him. Ed would do it in the manner of a third-rate villain in this story. So that he could reach the end of this story, he must survive. In a luxurious room, a young man was seen reading a letter he was holding. The letter contained the sins he had committed so far, such as using dirty words in front of the princess, interfering in the entrance examination of the Holy Sylvania Academy, and so on. While reading the letter, the young man wondered if they removed his name from the family register. He felt like God's fate was mocking him. The young man was Ed Roth Taylor, and soon he was kicked out of the house he lived in. People then talked about it, but there were people who were still afraid of him because of his bad reputation. But his friend told him not to worry, because Ed was not even recognized by his own family. He even got kicked out of his dormitory. Hearing that with a little anticipation, he then asked, would they not see him in the next semester, and said, he shouldn't have cheated on the entrance examination. Now the situation has become very sad. Ed himself can now only sit in the garden while feeling depressed. He feels that this is unfair, because the arrogant Ed Roth Taylor that people are talking about is not him. He himself is a modern human who entered into a game. This game is based on the magic school, Sylvania Academy, his favorite game, the failed swordman of the Sylvania. Generally, when someone enters a game in Webtoons, they would be the son of a noble, a genius but bastard clan young master, or a lawless SSS rank hunter. But out of all the possibilities, he was a third-rate villain who was kicked out of the dormitory at the beginning of the game. He had become the worst character at the worst time. Ed then cried out unfairly with the situation that happened to him. He had always lived simply, not even greedy. Seeing that, the people around him then felt surprised, because Ed still said unfair after all he had done. They felt Ed was really shameless for saying he lived simply, while Ed himself could only sit transfixed while holding back his shame. They then walked away. Ed then looked at the mirror. There he was surprised by his stats. He wondered if these stats were real. He attended the magic faculty, but his intellect stat was really pathetic. Even his stamina was too low for a nobleman. Even the peasant NPC had a stamina of 5. No wonder he was only a third-rate villain who appeared in the early scenarios. Even he himself didn't remember much about Ed Roth Taylor's character. He didn't remember what would happen to him later. But then he suddenly remembered something about Ed. In the corner of the ending credits, he became a beggar, like a tramp. Ed really bemoaned his future fate, but at least, He was lucky to be alive. He then could only sigh, and wondered why he possessed Ed's body. He didn't know the reason, nor did he need to find out. He then strengthened his resolve and said he would try his best. Rather than a school, the Sylvania Academy was more like a city with the entire Arkan Mountains as its place. In the northeast of the academy, there was an untouched forest. Ed tried to escape from the gaze of the students, and ended up here after walking for half a day. That was enough to explain the situation he was in. When Ed was expelled, that was the extreme beginning of the scenario. Fortunately, although he was expelled by his family, he hadn't been expelled from his school just yet. This was very important, because in the game it was said that Sylvania Academy was a top academy. If one graduated from here, they could be guaranteed a bright future, and as long as the game setting is still in the academy, he can use the information of the 5 times dedicated players to the maximum. He can live comfortably and better than his previous life. So, his goal now is clear, which is to graduate. But the problem now is the tuition fee. This semester's fee has already been paid, so he only needs to think about the fee for next semester. Ed paused for a moment because he knew how difficult it was to get money with his current situation, and thought, whether with his pathetic stats he could get a scholarship. He could only pray that he would not fail. He then decided to think about his tuition fees later. First, he had to solve the important problem, namely clothing, food, and shelter. How to avoid turning into a bum for the next week. He still had enough clothes in his suitcase, so he just needed to find food and shelter. But the problem was that he had no shelter or food for today. It was difficult to find a job because of his bad reputation. He also couldn't go to the dormitory because he had been expelled. It seemed that he would be in the forest for some time. He was grateful that at least there was still a river nearby. There are still 10 days before school starts. Until then, Ed decided to train himself so that he can compete with his peers. In a forest near the Sylvania Academy, there is someone who chants wind blade repeatedly, which creates gusts of wind around. That person is of course Ed, although his stats are pathetic. But he is still grateful for at least being able to use spells. Even though this is tiring, he himself was also surprised. Because he was exhausted, like he was going to die just from cutting 15 tree trunks. This also made him even more hungry. He felt that this was not very useful. He hated his family for not even giving him a meal before they kicked him out. He wondered if this hunger arose because of using magic. Ed really felt hungry at this time. He then remembered his grandfather's words when he was a child. When hunger struck when his grandfather was a child, he said he ate tree bark in the mountains behind. While enduring hunger, Ed then continued to stare at the tree trunk in front of him. He then decided to boil the tree trunk using the ignition spell. He couldn't be picky now. He had to eat anything while it was edible. After taking a closer look at it, Ed felt that it was like a chicken breast. He then decided to eat it, and as he chewed it, he then felt that he couldn't stand the horrible taste and spit it out. On the 3rd day, after starving for a day and vomiting for 2 days, he drew the conclusion that the wood should be used to build a house. First, he needed to raise the frame to support the wood. He only had 2 hands, but 4 supports were needed. This is not an easy job. Ed himself failed many times, but he still kept trying, until finally he succeeded in tying the frame. Now the frame of the residence is complete, but he knows that there is still a long way to go. He can't sleep in the field, although it is a little unfortunate, but he has no other choice, and the night has now turned into morning, until Ed finally managed to build his simple residence. But he was then surprised when a system window appeared in front of him. His crafting proficiency had increased after doing that work. He was surprised that the crafting system also appeared now. Ed lived as a noble, so he probably didn't know. He was more talented with dexterity than magic. His handiness even reached level 4. Knowing that, Ed then decided to utilize his dexterity stat to make a weapon called Simple Harpoon. After making the weapon, Ed then decided to look for a more decent meal. He had spent 2 days on an empty stomach. As well as doing excessive work, he shouldn't be able to move now, but perhaps it was the feeling of depression that drove him. He wanted to eat meat, so he tried to fish in the river. Luckily he managed to catch some fish. He was very happy about it and decided to cook it right away. A week before school started, he just needed to survive like now. If he could survive until then, he could go through school without much trouble. That's how Ed thought at this moment. Someone suddenly came up to him. Ed was shocked when he saw who it was. He was so busy surviving that he forgot something important. The person who came was a beautiful girl with blonde hair, one of the main characters in the story. but of all people, Ed did not expect to meet her here. He then recalled the scene in the game. There was Ed who was arrested and was about to be expelled from the academy by her. She was the Princess of Fenia, the person who expelled Ed Roth Taylor from the dormitory.
So, friends, this chapter comes to an end. What will happen next? We'll uncover it in the next chapter. Don't forget to rate this chapter out of 10 in the comments. We'll see you in the next video. Until then, take care and goodbye. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel.